A long time ago, something very sad happened in history: the African slave trade. This means people from Africa were taken away from their homes and treated unfairly. Usually, we think only Europeans were involved in this, but there's another part of the story we often forget. The Arabs were also a big part of it. This essay talks about how the Arab people were part of the African slave trade and how it still affects the unfair treatment of African-descended people today. Historical overview. Let's go back in time, way back to the 7th century. That's when the Arab slave trade started. Arab merchants, like traders from Europe, were also a big part of this trade. They traveled across the ocean, capturing Africans and taking them to different places, like the Middle East. They did this for various reasons. Some needed workers, some wanted companions, and others sought soldiers. The Arab slave trade began even before the more famous transatlantic slave trade that we often hear about. Now think about this like a big story with many layers. The Arab merchants were involved in a trade network that went across the Indian Ocean. They took African people away from their homes and brought them to places far away. This wasn't just about money. It was also about culture, power, and making choices that hurt many people. The consequences of this forgotten chapter in history reach beyond the past, leaving a lasting impact on how people treat each other today. As we dig deeper into this story, we discover not only the sadness of so many people suffering, but also how different cultures, economies, and power played a part. The Arab merchants wanted to gain economic benefits by using African labor and setting up complicated trade routes. This wasn't just about making money. It was also about how power, greed, and culture mixed together. The effects of this forgotten chapter are not just in the past. They've shaped how people see and treat each other even today. When we look at the long-lasting effects of the Arab involvement in the African slave trade, we have to face some uncomfortable truths. Discrimination, treating people unfairly, is still a big issue faced by African-descended people today. The echoes of this sad history are found in the unfairness that exists in systems, cultural beliefs, and social structures. By understanding the different layers of this story, we're not just learning about the past. We're also trying to shine a light on the way forward, hoping for a world that is fair and equal for everyone, no matter where they come from or what they look like. Arab slave trade dynamics. Unlike the transatlantic slave trade, the Arab slave trade didn't have a centralized system or something like the infamous Middle Passage. Instead, getting slaves was a complex process that involved raids, wars, and large trade networks across the Sahara Desert and the Indian Ocean. Arab slave traders set up important markets in cities such as Zanzibar, Cairo, and Baghdad. These places became hubs where people were bought and sold before being taken to different parts of the Arab world. This way of getting slaves was different from the transatlantic model. The Arab slave trade was more flexible and spread out across different places. Since there wasn't a concentrated sea route like the Middle Passage, how they got slaves was influenced by many things, from the tough realities of desert wars to the complex network of trade connections over both land and sea. Impact on today's discrimination. The hidden history of how Arabs were part of the African slave trade still affects how people of African descent are treated today. The long-lasting effects of slavery have become a part of how people think, leading to unfair ideas and stereotypes that continue to exist. Discrimination shows up in many harmful ways, from unfair racism built into systems to big differences in money and opportunities, and even in widespread social unfairness. The effects of the way the Arab slave trade worked can still be felt today. It's like the echoes of those dynamics are woven into the fabric of history, creating a complicated pattern of past injustices that still shapes how things are now. The decentralized nature of the Arab slave trade, with its varied ways of getting and moving slaves, has left a deep mark on how people see the world. Understanding and untangling the threads of this sad history is crucial for seeing why unfair treatment still happens today. By facing this historical complexity, societies can start breaking down the deep structures of discrimination and work towards making a future that includes everyone fairly. Cultural and religious influences. The way the Arab slave trade worked was closely tied to cultural and religious beliefs, shaping how people saw and justified the practice. Some who took part in the Arab slave trade found a kind of approval in the interpretations of Islamic teachings that allowed the enslavement of people who weren't Muslims. This religious approval made it seem more acceptable and influenced how people in Arab societies viewed slavery. It had a lasting impact on how Africans were seen in these communities. The mix of cultural and religious factors not only made enslavement seem okay, but also created a complex moral system for the Arab slave trade. Different people interpreted Islamic teachings in various ways, leading to diverse opinions among religious scholars and communities. This complicated relationship between religion and the slave trade adds layers to the historical story, showing how faith, cultural norms, and money interests all played a part. Legacy of colorism. The Arab slave trade left a mark that goes beyond just money and religion, especially when it comes to the way people are treated based on their skin color. Sadly, the value given to slaves often depended on how light or dark their skin was. Lighter-skinned slaves were seen as more valuable and were treated better than those with darker skin. This preference for lighter skin hasn't gone away and still affects how people in Arab communities think today. The legacy of colorism, which started with the Arab slave trade, shows up in how people are treated differently based on their skin color. This makes discussions about race and identity more complicated in Arab societies, reminding us that the unfair treatment from the past still influences how people interact today. Understanding the cultural and religious sides of the Arab slave trade is vital for making sense of the unfair treatment and biases that exist today. It shows us the importance of talking openly and thinking deeply within societies so everyone can understand the historical reasons behind the inequalities we still see and work towards a fairer and more equal future. Addressing historical injustices. Recognizing the forgotten Arab history in the African slave trade is a crucial step in addressing historical injustices and fostering a better understanding of the roots of discrimination. It calls for open dialogue, education, and acknowledgement of this shared history to promote healing and reconciliation. The Arab involvement in the African slave trade is a neglected aspect of history that has had enduring consequences on contemporary discrimination. Acknowledging this forgotten history is essential for fostering awareness, understanding, and working towards dismantling the deeply embedded prejudices that persist today. By confronting the historical roots of discrimination, societies can move towards building a more inclusive and just future for all. This is it for today's video. What do you think of our video? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more future updates. Thanks for watching.